Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to another informative webinar event with cStor. This is another in our cybersecurity series. Today's event, 2022 Threat Brief, Insights from the Cyber Frontline, featuring Andrew Roberts, Chief Cybersecurity Strategist with cStor, and two of our expert guest speakers with longtime partner at Arctic Wolf, Scott Savoya, and Coleman Sanders, both part of the Southwest Large Enterprise Account Team, again with our Arctic Wolf. Thank you for joining us today. Again, I'm Kim, your webinar organizer. Before we begin, I do want to take a quick moment to point out a few helpful tips to ensure you have a great experience on today's session. First, you should have an orange control panel, an orange arrow button. You can minimize or maximize that window with the orange arrow. Second, we will take as many questions as time allows at the end of today's session. Please post questions to the questions pane in the control panel at any time. And finally, no need to take notes. We are recording today's session and we'll share the recording link with everyone following the event. That does come out within half a day to a day or so. Just keep an eye out. So with that, let's get started. Before we dive into the main event, I do want to pass it over to Andrew Roberts for a brief intro to cStor, and then we'll get going. Andrew?
Okay, thanks, Kim, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this, our fourth webinar in the second annual CyberWise Tour. I'm excited about today's webinar, and I hope you take full advantage of the insights that are going to be offered to you today. I am Andrew Roberts, cStor's Chief Cybersecurity Strategist, and I will be your host today and for the rest of the CyberWise series. After today's session, there's only one more CyberWise webinar on August 17th, so make sure you don't miss that. And then next month, we'll wrap up our CyberWise Tour with in-person panel discussions with each of the speakers from the webinars and possibly some other expert guests. So you'll have the opportunity to ask your questions that you didn't ask during the webinar and any other questions that you may have. We always have familiar people in the audience, but we also have some new folks with us too. For those that are not familiar with cStor, let me just take a couple of minutes to get you acquainted. cStor was founded 20 years ago. We've grown over the years and at the request of our clients have added a number of new practices and services, including my favorite, cybersecurity. We constantly strive to help our clients solve their difficult IT challenges by bringing end-to-end solutions that make the most sense for business and for your IT environment. And we do that by putting our clients first and bringing vendor agnostic solutions that are customized to your specific needs. Cybersecurity is only one of our focus areas where we excel. Our team has people like me, people who have significant experience as cybersecurity practitioners, working in jobs just like yours, and we have faced many of the same challenges that you face every day. We back up each of our focus areas, cybersecurity, modern infrastructure, and digital transformation, with robust services delivered by experienced engineers to help bridge gaps and get you the most from your investment dollars as quickly as possible. But enough about cStor. Arctic Wolf is well positioned to see all of the cybersecurity badness that happens out there every day, and we're excited to hear about some of the insights that they have from the cyber frontline. So with that, I am very pleased to introduce Arctic Wolf's Coleman Sanders and Scott Savoya, who are here to share with us. Coleman, Scott, it's all yours.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate the invite and allowing us to be a part of the Cyber Frontline series that you guys are doing. I'm joining you live from Phoenix. I'm the account executive on our the Southwest team for Arctic Wolf, joined as always by my technical counterpart and the brains behind our business, Scott Savoya.
Thanks, Coleman. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'll be your tour guide for the first few slides here, and then I'll turn it over to Coleman. But yeah, we're going to run through kind of what we've seen in 2022 and kind of look at cyber risk, that we're all facing today. So we look at like technology trends, right? If you look at the last couple decades, we've been dealing with the speed of innovation, right? And technology trends are continuing to exponentially increase risk. Now they're increasing productivity, right? If you talk to a lot of end users or employees, they love new widgets and gadgets and apps and ways that they can consume and do their work. But what we're really seeing is this leads to increased risk. And so the first one, the big trend that we're seeing is the cloud, right? If we go all the way back to 2005, right, that was the first year that laptops outsold desktops for the first time. And so we started to kind of hear that death knell for the traditional network perimeter, right? You know, you've got laptops that can walk right out and walk right back in, and you don't have any control over the networks that they're connected to. You know, fast forward to today, right? Gartner is predicting that there's going to be $482 billion spent this year on cloud services. So that is software as a service, that's infrastructure as a service. And really the challenge for IT professionals is that's somebody else's data center, so to speak, right? Somebody else's equipment. So getting visibility into those environments is really challenging. You know, that number, that 482 billion is up from 313 billion just 2 years ago in 2020. So there's a massive adoption on the cloud. What's really interesting here is the Arctic Wolf, right? We've got 3,500 customers. We pulled over 300 IT leaders last year to ask them about cloud. And the really interesting thing was only 22% that we pulled had a plan for cloud security posture management. So what is that? It's a fancy way of saying really being able to understand what do you have in the cloud. So an inventory perspective, is it hardened? You know, those of you may remember Capital One, their S3 bucket breach, right? Where they had 100 million you know, records, customer records were exposed just because somebody didn't know to secure an S3 bucket. So there's this whole, you know, this whole other challenge that, you know, organizations are dealing with. And then on top of that, you know, we're in the middle of the fourth industrial revolution, if you will, or Industry 4.0. You know, kind of the speed of innovation is insane right now. And so we're seeing everything from, you know, your traditional laptops, desktops, and things like that getting faster and more powerful. But, you know, you've got wearables, industrial control systems, and things like that from an attack surface. But what's really interesting is we're seeing we're seeing a new trend here. If you look at the Verizon data breach investigations report from last year for 2021, 82% of all breaches had a human element involved. So that is, you know, somebody had misconfigured something or they clicked on something. But we're seeing that, you know, attackers are increasingly using more novel social engineering attacks and things like that, spear phishing attacks to go after individuals. So we're seeing a real need for increased user awareness training. You know, going back to kind of that increasing productivity for your end users, but that also increases your attack surface as well. And then last but not least, right, we're seeing the sophistication of the attacks increase, right? We're starting to see, you know, infrastructure attacks. We're starting to see, you know, mass botnets and things like that. And the challenge is, you know, everybody's dealing with cyber criminals now. So we have nation states, right? And if we go back to the nation state attackers in 2016, right, shadow brokers, so a lot of the NSA toolkits were leaked out onto, you know, kind of the internet, if you will. And that emboldened a lot of these cyber criminals to, you know, have these tactics, techniques, and procedures that nation states were doing to make their attacks even more successful. In just, you know, kind of, you know, along those same lines, SonicWall saw 700 million ransomware or extortion attacks last year. And that's just SonicWall. So, you know, all of this combined leads to, you know, increased cyber risk, obviously. But according to, you know, Foundry, they did a security priority study in 2021. 90% of security leaders feel that they're falling short when it comes to cyber risk. So as you can see, there's a lot to quantify here. And so how do you do this? How do you deal with this, right? And so the real challenge is having a need for increased visibility, but also having a framework to operationalize that, right? To really be able to take your security operations and get you to secure outcomes in a repeatable way. So what I have up here on the slide, right, this is the NIST cybersecurity framework, which is a really powerful asset for cybersecurity practitioners, because it's really flexible and it has great adaptability, and it's a really good tool to use to kind of spark those conversations around cyber risk and compliance within your organization, and also something to follow. So, you know, from a tactical perspective, though, you know, it really starts with understanding your environment. So from identifying your risk, really, and your assets. So it's really starting with a baseline of understanding, you know, what does your hardware look like? What does your software look like? But also extending that to the cloud, and then extending this to not just assets, but also individuals, right? Understanding who are your most targeted individuals. You know, it's easy to go after the CFO and the CEO, but, you know, depending on the business you're in, you may have researchers or scientists. They may be targeted. So understanding all of that. And then maybe working with, partners like cStor and others to come in and do pen test. So just to really understand and identify where are you at in your posture. And then taking that a step further with protect, right? This is making sure that things are configured properly. And this is kind of the obvious, right? Your firewall's configured properly. Do you have cloud configured properly, right? If, things not exposed. But taking this down to the human level as well and making sure that you have, kind of user-based access control, if you will, where, employees only have access to what they need to do their job, right? So that, if one of their accounts gets popped, they don't have access to things that they shouldn't have access to. And then the detection, this is the challenge, right? This is where you need to have that broad visibility across your entire attack surface. This is monitoring your network. This is monitoring your cloud, your endpoints, your users, and all of that in near real time. And then having the kind of the threat intelligence, if you will, and the technology to combine and correlate these activities to figure out, what is good, what is bad. And then from the response side, this is making sure, do you have a plan in place? Do you know how to respond to these incidents? Do you have staff that are trained in how to respond to a ransomware attack or a phishing incident, things like that? And then recover, right? This is everything from, making sure that you've got backups and you've got, fairly recent backups, and that becomes part of your regular cadence. But this could also be cyber insurance from a recover perspective, right? Understanding all of this from a business perspective of, not pretending like this might happen, but planning for, kind of the inevitable, right? A lot of people say, assume breach. And if you do, and you follow this framework and you practice this and, tabletop exercises and things like that, then when you run into an incident, it's not as daunting as if you're not prepared. Right, so how does this all play out? Oops, sorry, still getting used to this interface. Right, so at Arctic Wolf, right, so here's some insight into what we see, right? So I mentioned we have 3,500 customers. Our customers, right, trust us from a security operations perspective. And so we monitor their attack surface. So you can see here, network IDS, Active Directory, SaaS, our agent, and things like that. You can't just cover one facet of the attack surface and expect to be protected today, right? As you can see, right, various types of attacks from a networking perspective, obvious ones like phishing. But as we've seen with COVID, and kind of the rise of remote working now, or increase in remote working rather, right? We're seeing a lot of business email compromise. We're seeing a lot of things like impossible travel, and you've got to be collecting telemetry, log data, pulling API data out of cloud environments, so that you can combine and correlate all this in near real time, and then have the expertise to investigate this and to understand not only what happened, but to learn from it, right? Be able to do a root cause analysis after you have an event to figure, learn from it. How can you prevent this from happening in the future? Is this as simple as it might be user awareness training, right? It might be you have people that just like to click things. You got to kind of beat them over the head with the user awareness stick, if you will. Or it could be having the understanding, having the technical understanding to understand what would have mitigated this. Could it be something as simple as multi-factor authentication, or is it, maybe you need to look at things like geofencing firewalls? And so there's no, silver bullet here where if you just focus on one aspect of your attack surface, you'll be protected. And then last but not least, I thought we would go through, before I turn it over to Coleman, I thought we'd go through a real world ransomware attack example. So this, is very apropos. Also, according to the Verizon data breach investigation report for last year, there was a 13% increase in the number of ransomware attacks. Now, when you look at that 700 million number from SonicWall, it's not that shocking. But what's really interesting is that 13% increase was as much as the last 5 years combined. So kind of, what we see a lot of times in security, what is old is new again. And so we see attackers taking that route. Now, this is an example. This was a customer that we onboarded. This is a real example. Marketing only helped with make this slide pretty. But this was a customer of ours that we had onboarded, and this happened on a Saturday morning, what I'm about to go through. So you see the polygons up there. So you see the Arctic Wolf platform, our triage team, the customer, and then what we call our concierge security team, which is an extension of our triage team, really. So we kicked this off, right, starting at 5:23 in the morning. we saw a user account, user one, logging into multiple systems, right? And anybody that's been in security or IT for a while knows that when you see something like that happen, especially 5 o'clock in the morning, chances are it's not good. And so you can see the source here is Active Directory. So remember, you have to monitor all these various facets of your attack surface to have this visibility. So for us, we plug into Active Directory, multi-factor authentication tools as well. So we can see this at 5:23 with our platform. And then 3 minutes later at 5:26, right, we have our sensors. Our sensors monitor north-south internet traffic and also collect syslog data and other things. Our sensor, right, it sees C2 traffic, right? So command and control traffic, which is indicative of either botnet or some type of ransomware activity, right, where an endpoint is going to beacon out looking for instructions on what to do next or download the payload. So in this case, we're seeing that outbound communication, possible C2, and then we're seeing a PowerShell Empire activity on a server, which is PowerShell is a very powerful command line tool that usually when you can get it running on a box, you have full control. So 5 minutes after we saw that initial hit with Active Directory, right, an investigation's triggered. Now this is important, right? So this is not only do you need to have the visibility and to be monitoring 24/7 through 65, but you've got to have the expertise to go in and make sense of all this, right? So that's where our triage team jumps in. The investigation's triggered rather. That C2 traffic is correlated with that PowerShell Empire activity, so we know that we do see bad on this server, and then it's escalated, right? So getting to our triage team, they go in and they're gonna confirm all this, right? So they're confirming the network and the PowerShell Empire activity, and it's a true positive. And so that's also one of the keys, right? With collecting the amount of telemetry we're talking about and collecting it from across your entire attack surface, there's the challenge of false positives. And so having technology, but also expertise that can go in and quickly figure out is something a true positive or a false positive. And so in this case, right, roughly 6 minutes after the initial hit, we're seeing the investigation start, and we've actually confirmed that this is bad. And then what happens next is, we ticket the incident, all that, but really what this is, on the NIST cybersecurity framework, this is really the respond piece of it, right? So do you know how to respond? And so in this case, right, we're telling them to contain the device, which means isolate it and block it off of the network so it can't speak to anything else, and change passwords, for those accounts, and then run an AV scan, right, to make sure there's no other nefarious activity. But the key here, right, is then the customer remediates and this is contained. With the next piece, right, that I was talking about before is root cause analysis. All right, so understanding what has happened to your environment, how to mitigate it from happening again, and then really learning from it, right? So is it technology that maybe you have to acquire? Is it technology that maybe you already own that you're not taking advantage of in getting the full return on investment, if you will, and others. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Coleman for our final slide. You ready, Coleman?
I am. Thanks, Scott. Thank you for running through that example, Scott. I always like when we can talk about real world examples and what we're seeing across our customer base, or even not on our customer base. Anecdotes like that I think are really important. And one thing Scott really likes to say that I've definitely taken to heart is cybersecurity. It's a journey. It's a little bit like working out. You can't do 10 push-ups and say, okay, I'm done doing push-ups for the rest of my life. It's a process. It's a continual process of improvement, and cybersecurity is exactly that. And one of the things we also like to say, right, is any cybersecurity practitioner, if they tell you, you work with us, you work with our team, you buy our tool, you will be 100% protected no matter what. Anybody who tells you that, you shouldn't believe them, because especially with cybersecurity and cyber risk, it's not really a factor of if, it's when. It's most important in how you respond, how you recover, and making sure that you're gathering telemetry to understand as soon as a bad actor has access to your system. So at Arctic Wolf, our goal is to reduce the impact and likelihood of cyber risk. And one of the most important metrics in cybersecurity is mean time to identify, sometimes called dwell time. The industry average is over 200 days, and at Arctic Wolf, we commit to doing it in 30 minutes or less. Now, we've also found that 39% of attacks we discovered for our customers happen when they would normally be off the clock, so between 8 p.m. 8 a.m. These two data points are key, because it ensures that we identify incidents before they escalate into full-blown breaches. And for the rest of these metrics, it's important to keep in mind that all of our customers have a variety of security tools already in place. Scott and I work with the large enterprise segment here in the Southwest, and generally that can be correlated to the most complex customers, but a broad variety of tools in their environments as well. So even with those in place, we still identify phishing activity that was able to bypass security tools in 18% of our customer base. We also identify advanced threat activity, for example, command and control beaconing, that was able to bypass security tools in over 43% of our customer base. We're also able to identify some degree of PII exposure in 69% of our install base, and 19% have received critical alerts, plain text or easily decipherable passwords. We also enable customers to patch critical vulnerabilities about 58% faster. So with that, I will kick it back over to Kim for some Q&A.
Thanks so much, Coleman, and to Scott for your expertise. At this time, we will open it up for questions. As a reminder, you can post them to the questions pane, and we do have a few coming in, so we'll dive right in. First question, can you explain the difference between managed EDR, XDR, and MDR?
You want to take this one, Coleman?
No, that's a good question. We'll give it to the engineer.
It's a great question.
Yeah, awesome. So really, this is a little bit of a history lesson, right? In my opinion. So MDR came out several years ago, managed detection and response, and then a lot of the endpoint vendors, I won't pick on anyone in particular, but a lot of them came out with endpoint tools, especially EDR tools, right? So endpoint detection and response. And if you've never used those tools, they're highly complex. I used to use the analogy like it's like giving a toddler a Swiss Army knife. They're not necessarily going to know how to use that, and they may get hurt with it. And so a lot of those vendors got asked, and can you manage my endpoint tool? It's too complex. I want to get the value out of it, but I don't have the expertise. And so managed endpoint detection and response was born, which kind of gets merged into MDR. So if you're talking to a vendor and they talk about managed detection and response, find out if it's multifaceted, and that's where XDR comes in, right? So XDR was the brainchild of somebody at Palo Alto many, many moons ago, and it's really taking that managed detection and response, and the X is kind of cross-dimensional, where you're seeing it from the endpoint, from the network, from the cloud, from the user, and all those various facets of the attack surface. Arctic Wolf, even though we talk that we're MDR, managed detection and response, but we're really managed XDR because we're collecting telemetry from a variety of sources. So that's really the differences there.
Excellent, thank you so much. Next question. What new business technology concerns you the most from a threat perspective?
Go ahead, Coleman.
Another good question. I'll give that to Scott, the engineer, as well.
Yeah, we've been talking about this a little bit, just Coleman and I, as friends outside of work. And one of the things that concerns me is just some of the sentient AI things that are coming, whether it's Google AI, self-driving cars, things like that. Just the security person in me always looks at that as an attack surface. For example, like cars. We've seen that with just some savvy eBay shopping and things like that, people can go around and pop open cars and start some cars and things like that. So for me, it's a lot of that type of some of the AI, but more of the automation and things like that, just becoming another piece of the attack surface. Coleman, I don't know if you've got an opinion on that as well.
No, I agree with you. I know we've talked about it quite a bit, Scott, that it would probably be nothing scarier than having those bad actor nation states get access to a next generation AI and leverage it for even something as simple as phishing or smishing just the capabilities it could have in that area would be would be huge. Very scary.
I mean, we're starting to see adversarial AI. I mean, there's, attackers are going to be using this to their advantage. I mean, why not automate if you can? So yeah, I mean, that's definitely a big concern.
Excellent, thank you. It sounds like with each new advancement in technology, it's not or in adding an attack surface, right? It's always an and. There's another one and another one. So
absolutely,
it's good to be cognizant of that. Thank you. Next question. I'm having trouble getting executive buy-in to improve our security posture. Do you have any recommendations on how to have that conversation? It's a good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. It's one Scott and I get sometimes, not often. I guess it depends who we talk to, but it's definitely a good question for me on the sales side of our team, because a lot of what I do is help our customers and prospects have the business conversation. I would say the first step, and I would imagine most of you have been doing it, is quantify the cost of downtime, right? What would the cost of an impact mean to our business? Because I think we all know that executives and board members, the way they think about IT comes down to dollars and cents and protecting the product and the company's bottom line. So I know we've all been doing that for the last 5, 6, 7 years when it comes to a disaster recovery perspective, and I think it's been really powerful to have a good impact in our industry and helping kind of up level that conversation around disaster recovery. When it comes to cyber risk, I think it's important to run a similar type thought scenario around, how do you quantify your own internal cyber risk? There's a lot of tools, and generally the way the industry goes is, let's get a tool, let's look at some of my vulnerabilities. But Scott and I generally are on the school of thought of work with a team like cStor and Andrew's team, team of smart practitioners that have a lot of tools in their tool chest, and a lot of experts that used to also be at companies like yours that can go through the process with you and really work on how to quantify what cyber risk means for your business, so you can put some dollars and cents and some timelines together to help escalate the severity to the powers that be.
Yeah, I definitely second that. Leveraging folks like Andrew and his team that have been through it and have done it, right? I mean, it can be daunting if you're taking it on for the first time, but leveraging that experience, that expertise, it's critical, and it saves you time. I mean, and especially you're looking at cyber risk, cybercrime, and all of this. I mean, time is money, right? So it's definitely lean on the experts.
Thank you. That's a great point. Time is money, especially in this space. We've got a couple more questions and time for them, so we'll get to them. The next question, what are you seeing some of your clients do to mitigate these risks? Seems it's getting more and more complex. So are there some trends there you both can share?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big ones I touched upon on my first slide was user awareness training. I think we're seeing a big focus, at least on the user side now, where, for example, there's a thing called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, where humans forget 80% of what they've learned in 30 days or less. And this is a real thing. You can Google it, like a forgetting curve. And so what a lot of organizations have found is, going back to the Verizon breach report, right? 82% of breaches involved a human element. That means like somebody clicked on something, or maybe it was a misconfiguration. Either way, right? That's awareness, right? Of one way or another. And so we've seen a big shift in that, or big focus in that, where doing that training consistently and more often. So instead of doing that, that training 1 or 2 times a year, where people sit down for like an hour and they're like, okay, I got to do this, and they knock it out, and then it's out of sight, out of mind, reinforcing that, every couple weeks or even weekly. So we've, a lot of the prospects we talked to a lot of CISOs that are running some type of user awareness, some type of phishing exercise, like almost weekly or every couple weeks now, and really upping that just to get that top of mind, to get that culture shift within their organization around security.
It is kind of a tight line to walk, though, because you don't want to inundate your end users with hours or even a half hour worth of training every week, but you do want to make sure that they're aware of new things are happening, right? And the different terminology that's used around phishing and smishing and things like that. So find a way to mitigate as much of the human element as possible by adapting awareness training that is bite size, that can be done, that people will actually click. I know that we have one here at Arctic Wolf that I actually like. I'm not a traditional IT person, but so I was in Scott's previous example of I got my curriculum, I have to get through it, it's mandatory. At the end of the 6 months, you've got a bunch of courses backed up, and I would normally just take a half a day and chug through them all, do something else, write some emails while it's playing in the background, hope I can pass the quiz and move on to the next one. And I think that's the way it's been done for so long. And does that really help, right, mitigate the human error side of the equation? So, there's a lot of tools out there nowadays that can do bite-sized training, that you can click on the training when actually it's your inbox. We have one here that I like because I don't have to log in to anything. I don't even have to go through Okta. It takes me right through the training. A lot of times there's not a quiz. It's 2 or 3 minutes. I can get it done while I'm having a cup of coffee, and I actually pay attention to it. So I think that's really key, as Scott had mentioned, to help with the human element, because we all know that's the biggest component.
Yeah, and I'll add the other one that's come up lately, just around mitigating risk, is around the cloud. I mean, a lot of focus around cloud security, posture management, and focus there, realizing that it's a new attack vector. It has to be viewed as a piece of kind of virtual infrastructure, as you will, or an extension of the org. So those two have been the ones that have been coming up the most.
Excellent, thank you. Next question, which fits right in line with this last one. If humans are the weakest link in the cybersecurity chain, how do we change that, or can we?
I think it has to expand upon that, the last question or last answer around user awareness training. I think it's a cultural shift. I think aside from the bite-sized chunks and you've got to make the curriculum interesting. It's got to be relevant. Like some of the ones that we do are, like the Colonial Pipeline attack. Like a lot of people saw that in the news, but they may not have totally understood what it meant, from a cybersecurity perspective. So educating people and things like that. But I think it's also just the overall culture of not penalizing people, right? A lot of times people are afraid to say something or to admit when they make a mistake, because there's, depending on the organization, right, that can be frowned upon. So I think instead of, having the culture where, okay, yeah, you made a mistake, let's turn this into a learning moment versus let's beat you down with, the proverbial stick. So that's the biggest one. I think to me, it's a cultural shift, but at the same time, I come from the school of thought of don't give people access to things that they should not have access to, right? I have kids in my house, and I have things in the house that are locked up away from them, right? That I don't want to have them access to my tools, or I have a pocket knife collection, things like that, right? It's just knowing, again, understanding what you have and protecting it. So I think there's that aspect as well of locking down access, but at the same time, not hammering people when they make mistakes.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think with the prevalence of smishing nowadays, I'm pretty sure we've all gotten that text from, hey, this is your CEO, I need you to go buy some gift cards from me. And I'll be honest, the first time I got that text, I took it seriously. I was confused. So luckily enough, I was working for a company that was a flat enough organization where I was able to call the CEO, and he had no idea what I was talking about, and then did a little investigation and understood what it was, right? But I think there's probably still a lot of people out there that haven't gotten that before, and I think we've probably all experienced somebody that's gotten caught by that before as well. Another thing I don't think we really touched on, Scott, right? Is the human error part is sure someone gets phished or smished or convinced to make a bad decision, right? Go and input their credentials somewhere. But there's also,
Right.
right, configuration errors, right? So being
For
able
sure.
to have a trusted partner, whether it's Arctic Wolf, whether that's cStor, somebody that you can go to and say, hey, I'm implementing a new tool, or I've got a PCI audit coming up. Can you help me prepare? Can you help me take a look at these configurations, right? Knowing who to tap and having a good bench is also really important to help eliminate a lot of that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Leverage those experts for sure.
Excellent, thank you. One last question, we'll sneak it in. We've got a little bit of time. It's about cyber insurance, and it seems premiums are going up. Do you have some comments on getting cyber insurance in general? Pros and cons or recommendations there?
This one's all Coleman. This has come up quite a bit recently as well. I'll let you take this one, Coleman.
Yeah, that's tough. I don't know. I would imagine there's a lot of people on the webinar today that have cyber insurance, had it in the past, maybe are looking at getting it. It's interesting, a couple of years ago, it was pretty easy to get cyber insurance. There was a lot of providers, and you could get some pretty good policies for a pretty good price. Last 2 years with the rise in ransomware, Scott had mentioned some of those statistics. Those cyber insurance companies have gotten creamed. A lot of them have gone out of business, stopped offering that product line entirely, and they're asking a lot more of their customers in order to be able to qualify for cyber insurance. So I think back to our previous conversation too, right? If you're looking to get cyber insurance and the rates are through the roof, or you have cyber insurance and your rates are doubling, it's not uncommon this last couple of months, we've seen prospective customers come to us and say, my cyber insurance rates have doubled. We're looking at how to self-fund because we can't get cyber insurance. They've given me this massive checklist of things that I need to do, almost audit-like, in order to qualify for cyber insurance, right? So I think, again, it's being able to work with some knowledgeable experts. Again, I'd recommend Andrew's team at cStor that can help you prepare for that, like you were preparing for an audit, to try to get the best rates possible, right? Cyber insurance is also interesting. It's a new kind of insurance offering, right? There's not exactly a marketplace you can go to. It's not easy to get competing bids. I would definitely lean on experts like Andrew and the cStor team for sure.
Thank you. That actually concludes our questions for today. And before we let you go, I just want to thank the Arctic Wolf team, Scott and Coleman, and of course, pass it back to Andrew actually before we depart for the day. Andrew, do you have some closing comments?
Yeah, I sure do. First, Coleman, Scott, thank you very much for sharing with us today. We really appreciate that. For everybody out there, thank you for hanging with us. Don't forget, we have one more webinar coming up on August 17th. We're going to be talking about why so much critical data is being compromised. And then that is the last webinar in the series. After that, in September, we'll have 2 live events, one here in Phoenix and another one in Las Vegas, where we'll bring all of the speakers from the previous webinars back together again to have a panel discussion with every one of you that can make it. And I hope to see you all there. So with that, thanks everyone, and have a great afternoon.
That concludes our event for today. Once again, thanks to the Arctic Wolf team and to Andrew Roberts. We look forward to seeing you on a future cStor event very soon. Have a great day.